Awesome. So we want to welcome everyone to our egg freezing event, Chilling for the Future. It's Girls' Night Out in, so we're kind of doing a little bit of both, aren't we? The in and out. Hopefully you got a glass of wine. And this is our educational happy hour as we look towards getting a good idea of what egg freezing might be at Vios Fertility, where our mission, of course, is to help our patients. We want to help them find their way to fertility health and treatment with the highest chance of success. And we use innovation, we use science and cutting edge technology, along with, hopefully, for you, an unparalleled patient experience. We have a few different centers of excellence, and this is our Vios Center for Fertility Preservation and Egg Freezing. And again, hoping to provide one of the best experiences of egg freezing and success. This is National Infertility Awareness Week, and so we have an amazing panel of guests. And National Infertility Awareness started with Resolve, and they are the National Infertility Association, which actually started in 1974. And they're really dedicated to ensuring that all people challenged in their family building journey can reach resolution through being empowered by knowledge, support by the community like this event, and united by advocacy and inspired to act. So with that, I'd like to introduce our amazing MC, Ji Suk Yi. And Ji hosts weekday evenings beginning at 7 p.m. on WGN Radio 720. And she was a daily contributing host on ABC 7 Chicago's Windy City Live for 7 seasons. She was also a feature writer and host for the Chicago Sun-Times digital series, The Grid, Neighborhood Eats, and she continues to be a freelance writer for the Sun-Times. And this grid would highlight delicious neighborhood hidden gems in restaurants, bars, delis, bakeries, and ice cream parlors. So at some point, I want to hear more about that. She was born in South Korea and immigrated to the U.S. when she was almost 5. And now calls Chicago her home. And we are very proud and happy to have you with us this evening. Ji.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Beltsos. Really appreciate being here. You know what? I had no idea. Wasn't even aware of National Infertility Awareness Week. And I think it's a very important occasion to mark, especially for me. I'm over 40 years old and I've had so many girlfriends, so many families that have gone through infertility and also dealt with the struggle of, should I have frozen my eggs earlier or should I freeze my eggs? So all of those questions, which I think are very important. It's a question that really I've struggled with over the years, even in my late 20s, throughout my 30s. I always wondered, how would I be able to deal and manage with my career as well as deal with my desires to have a family, especially when you haven't met the one yet, which can take a little bit of time nowadays, and especially with all the twists and turns in your career as well. So just want to welcome everybody. Hi to you in St. Louis, hi to you in Milwaukee, hi to everybody in Chicago. Hope you have your happy hour drink and you're ready to learn a lot. I think this is a conversation that really parents should start having with their daughters when they're very young. I think this is something that when you're talking to your children, or if you are a child, should be a conversation that you have, not just about reproductive health, but also about family planning, also egg freezing. All those topics should be discussed earlier on. And I feel, thank goodness for this current generation, and because of the work that Vios does and just sort of the breakthrough research and procedures that you guys have discovered and used that I've read about, which is really incredible, especially on the infertility side as well. I think it's something that really needs to be discussed, and something that I hope, hopefully in generations in the future, it's going to become more common that women are thinking about this, right away, like in their 20s, so I think this is fantastic. So it's an honor and privilege to be here with you. Wanted to first start off by asking everyone that's joined us, thank you, by the way, for joining us. Wanted to ask a couple of polling questions. So I think you'll be able to answer via Zoom. Are you tuning in to today's egg freezing webinar out of A, curiosity, B, because you'd like to freeze your eggs, or C, to learn more for a friend or family member? So you'll see that pop up and you can answer one of those. And then the second question is, what is your age? I know, age is just a number. And especially now, Vios can help you no matter what age bracket you're in. That's what I believe. So if you don't mind answering that. So those are the two questions right now that are up for you to answer. And I love that if you're a friend or family member that's joining us to get more information for a loved one, I think that's really incredible, because I think this is a topic that's difficult to talk about. And for a long time, it was very taboo to discuss. And I'm glad that it's coming to the forefront, and there's forums like this that you've made available for people to come and talk about it. So those are the first two questions. Let me know if I should move on to questions 3 and 4.
Everyone is answering them in real time right now, so you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Number 3, have you ever had your AMH level or your ovarian reserve tested? And Dr. Beltsos, you can explain what the AMH is.
Yeah, there's more to come. The anti-Müllerian hormone, which will be explaining by the physicians that are going to do a mini presentation, measures how many eggs you have left from when you were born. And this has become a very sexy test of fertility, if you will, and ovarian reserve is what they call it. So we'll learn more from Dr. Jeelani.
Perfect. So that's question number 3, if you've ever had that test done already. And then number 4, what are you drinking right now? Is it a glass of wine? Is it a cocktail? Is it a mocktail? Or is it other? So as long as you're hydrated, so you can make it through this wonderful presentation. So we have a lot coming up. Great. Okay, so a lot of you, over 50%, are joining us out of curiosity. Over 33% of you are actually wanting to freeze your eggs. So glad that you're here. And then 15% of you are here to learn more for a friend or family member. So we appreciate you being here as well. Looks like the age that we're looking at is 32 to 38 as being the highest percentage, around 36% of you in that bracket. 18 to 24, about 6% of you. Very good, very on top of your game here and your reproduction knowledge. 25 to 31, that's 33% of you are in that bracket. And then in the bracket that I'm in, 39 to 44, 15% of you. So thanks so much for joining us. And 45 and older, we've got 9% of you here. All of you are welcome. Something, no matter what age bracket you're in, you're going to learn something tonight that's very valuable. Okay, we're going to see the results of the other 2 questions. Pop up in just a minute. I'm excited to see what everybody's drinking.
I actually added water to that one, and I'm glad I did, because it looks like that's the majority.
Oh, is it?
You might have to scroll to see number 3 and 4.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Let's see. You know what? Let's see. There we go. I'll scroll. See, look, I'm technologically challenged. Okay. All I had to do was scroll down. Okay. So number 3, have you ever had your AMH level or your ovarian reserve tested? Oh, wow. A good majority of you have. 48% say yes, and 52% say no. And what are you drinking right now? 18% say wine. 70% of you are drinking water. Very good. Very healthy. I guess we haven't really started happy hour yet. A cocktail, 3%, and nobody is drinking beer or a mocktail. So there we go. So we know what everyone's doing. Okay, so right now we're going to introduce a wonderful team of reproductive endocrinologists and infertility specialists. And we have Dr. Roohi Jeelani of Vios Chicago. We have Dr. Ellen Hayes of Vios Milwaukee. We also have Dr. Violet Klenov of Vios St. Louis. But we're going to start off with Dr. Jeelani, who's going to be just sort of introducing you to the fertility evaluation. So I'm going to let you take it away, Dr. Jeelani.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that introduction, Ji, and thank you all for joining us. So we'll start talking about basic biology and why female and reproductive aging is so important. And Ji, like you said, when you review why one of the most common reasons why patients consider egg freezing is because they haven't met the one. Or the second most common is they're not where they would like to be in their career. So I think it's important to learn why is it important for females to look and freeze their eggs. So the first topic we'll cover is, as females, we're born with all of our eggs. So age becomes one of the most important factors in fertility. So at birth, we have about 3 million eggs, and then we hit puberty. You would think that we have a bunch, but then all of a sudden we lose majority of them and are left anywhere between 200 to 250,000. So a whole lot. So people think, well, that's a lot of eggs, and we still, never want that many kids. But the important thing to remember is that our body activates about 90 to 100 eggs each cycle, and out of that, one releases. Then you lose all of them. So what you would want to do, and I'm so glad majority of you have already tested your fertility, is to understand what your current ovarian reserve looks like. And how you do that is by testing 3 main parameters, hormones, in addition to an ultrasound. This is typically done on the first 5 days of your period. We call that in the world of fertility our baseline. And the reason it's a baseline, I always tell my patients, it's like an analogy. It's like a baseball game. So think of baseline, your cycle being right at home base, and then you're trying to gauge your gear, how hard that batter is going to hit that ball, depending on how hard it's working. So the more stressed that batter is, like if you put a bad player up there, if I was up there, I'd be panicking. The higher the hormones go and lower the quality. Okay, so what you want to look at is your FSH, that stands for follicle stimulating hormone. That's how hard your brain is working or anticipating working in order to get you to ovulate and recruit those eggs. What we say is ideally is less than 10 for anyone in that reproductive age group. That's what we're looking for as a fertility doctor. Hormone number 2 is your AMH. That stands for anti-Müllerian hormone. And like Dr. Beltsos said, that's the new sexy test. The best way to look at it is that's like your 401k. So if we dip into your ovary, right, we say, well, how many eggs do you have left? And we say, well, what does your ovarian reserve look like? Unfortunately, we can't quantify it. We can qualify it. So we put it in low, medium, and high. We like it above 1, ideally between 1 and 3. Sometimes if it's too high, then we worry about stuff like polycystic ovarian syndrome. That means too many eggs. Then we wonder, why is your body not releasing and recruiting like it should be? Then your last is your estrogen. That's released directly from your ovary to feed back to your brain and tell the brain if it's doing a good job or not. So they should always be looked at in conjunction with each other. So if it's getting food, the FSH, but it's not happy, meaning the estrogen is high and it's still crying, that means the FSH is going to go higher. So they should always be correlative together, and they should all be nice and low. They should be happy with each other. It's like a relationship, like a husband and a wife. They shouldn't be yelling at each other. So they should both be nice and happy, nice and low. At the same time, we do an ultrasound, and that ultrasound is a transvaginal ultrasound, meaning an internal ultrasound, and we go right next to the ovary, and we count the number of eggs. That's called your antral follicle count. So if you guys look at that little slide that we see, each dark spot, like a cyst appearing area, is a follicle. Each follicle holds 1 egg, and out of the 90 to 100 eggs that are activated, we only make enough food or FSH to recruit about 6 to 12 per side. Okay, those are the ones that come to the front line. Those are the ones kind of like raising their hand saying, pick me, choose me. And those are the ones that we can actually physically count on the ultrasound.
Wow.
Okay.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Jeelani. And we're going to have an opportunity at the end of the program to ask questions. So if you have questions for Dr. Jeelani or any of the other doctors, you'll have an opportunity to ask for questions. So let's go over now to Dr. Ellen Hayes of Vios, Milwaukee. So take it away, Dr. Hayes.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm going to run through what you can expect during and after the egg freezing process. So the slide that's up is an overview of what we do, the stages of the egg freezing process. And usually the test that Dr. Jeelani was just talking about would be done in a cycle before. so we can get an idea about your ovarian reserve. So you'd have some hormone levels in an ultrasound checked. So we could counsel you on what we would expect your ovaries to do and how they would respond with the treatment process. So month 1 would be preparation and sometimes evaluation for egg freezing. And then once you make your final decision and you're ready to move forward and you start a period, usually you will be on, I would say, this says day 1 to 14. I would say most women need about 10 to 12 days of hormone injections that you would use daily. So usually between 2 to 3 medications that you would use on a daily basis. We would follow you by seeing you every 2 or 3 days for a lab draw and an ultrasound, so we could look at your ovaries and see how your ovaries are responding, see how many eggs it looks like you're producing. And then based on measurements that we take at those monitoring visits, we decide when it looks like your eggs might be ready. And then we tell you to do a one-time trigger shot. And the trigger shot would cause you to ovulate if we let you go long enough. But instead, we schedule you a couple days later for an egg retrieval procedure where you receive anesthesia and we collect the eggs that you've produced. So the basics of the egg retrieval procedure, because I think people wonder about that, they worry about that a little bit. And I want to put your mind at ease, because the procedure, you know, people, once they've gone through it, they realize how simple and straightforward it actually is. So the oh, can you go back? So the basics here on this slide. So egg freezing requires that eggs are removed from the ovaries, obviously. And the eggs that are mature or fully developed would be the ones that we freeze and save for you to potentially use later. So when the patient's ready, if she wants to use her eggs in the future, we can thaw them, we can fertilize them, and create an embryo that would be transferred into the uterus. And in this picture, you can see a little diagram of the egg retrieval procedure itself. You can see the vaginal ultrasound wand and a tiny little needle that goes through the top of the vagina into the ovary. And we go into each little follicle that should contain an egg, and we aspirate the egg from each one, and then we switch sides and we do the same thing in the other ovary. Next slide, please. So the procedure itself usually takes between 15 and 30 minutes, depends on how many follicles you've produced. You do receive anesthesia. It's sedation, so it's light anesthesia. You're asleep, you don't feel anything, you're not aware of what's going on, but you're also breathing on your own. So it's really easy to wake up from that, and you're ready to go home, usually about 30, 45 minutes after the procedure itself. So like I mentioned, we use ultrasound guidance and we drain the follicles, and that's how we collect the eggs from the ovaries. And then we hand that fluid that we obtain to our embryologist in our laboratory, which they will then look through the fluid and identify the eggs and save those eggs. So the day of the procedure, after you go home, we just have you relax that day, because you did obviously receive strong medication for anesthesia. We have you relax, and we give you some recommendations about what to eat and drink to help minimize you retaining fluid after the procedure and keep you safe. You can't drive for 24 hours, so that's important to know. You would need a ride. And we also give you some restrictions with activity. For instance, we kind of limit strenuous exercise, things like that, for about 1 to 2 weeks after the egg retrieval procedure. So like any medical procedure, there are some risks involved, potential risks. The actual risks are very, very low. And so if you're someone who has never had anesthesia before, it's possible you could have a reaction to one of the medications used, but very, very unlikely. And like I mentioned, it's light anesthesia. There's risk for infection and bleeding. Those risks are very low. You get prophylactic antibiotics, and any kind of serious bleeding is extremely uncommon, as is any injury to nearby organs, because we're using ultrasound to guide us during the procedure so we can see a safe, direct path to get to those eggs. One other potential risk after egg retrieval is OHSS, which is ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And that's a syndrome where you can collect some fluid in the abdomen, the ovaries are enlarged, it can be uncomfortable, and you can get some bloating. Any serious consequence from that is extremely unlikely. So low risk that you would have anything other than just a little bloating that you had to wait and have resolved within 3 to 4 days usually. So then if you come back and you want to use the eggs that we've frozen, we can thaw the egg, and sperm is used to fertilize the egg. They can be fertilized either by putting sperm and egg together in the Petri dish, or more often we inject one sperm into each egg that we have. And once the eggs are fertilized, they become embryos. We grow them and culture them in the lab and watch their progress for about 3 to 5 days. So some things to think about with egg freezing. The goal is somewhere in the range of about 10 to 15 mature eggs to feel confident that we'll end up with a live birth. So for one baby, we need to have multiple eggs. The reason for that is because every egg that we retrieve is not necessarily a high quality egg that can produce a good viable embryo. So we have to have a higher number of eggs than what you want as far as pregnancies in the future. About 80 to 90% of the eggs will be healthy and thaw out and be viable, so you can use them. So that's a very good rate. And that's because we use a method of freezing called vitrification, which very rapidly freezes the eggs, and then we thaw them out quickly. And so they don't form ice crystals and aren't damaged. Some other important things to remember. The egg retrieval will not harm your future fertility. It will not cause you to run out of eggs sooner. Also, many women will try for pregnancy themselves before resorting to using their frozen eggs. And I think that kind of depends on the age that you're at when you're ready to start trying. There aren't any long-term health side effects, any bad health effects from taking the medications or doing the procedure of the egg retrieval. And it's also good to remember that once the eggs are frozen, there's not an expiration date. They're pretty much good indefinitely. It's not like putting something in your freezer where you need to use it within a few months. Frozen eggs and frozen embryos can be used for years and years, and they're just as healthy.
That is fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Hayes. It's really cool to know that having egg retrieval done doesn't affect your future fertility. And it's kind of interesting to think about it kind of as an insurance policy too. You can still try to get pregnant naturally as well with your partner. So that's great to think about. Okay, so now we're going to go over to Dr. Violet Klenov of Vios in St. Louis. So Dr. Klenov, I'm going to let you take it away now.
That's good. Thanks, Ji, and thank you everybody who's here tonight with us, drinking your cocktails and chilling out with us. So here at Vios, we're always looking at innovative ways to improve the outcomes that we're getting when we're freezing eggs or making embryos. And some of those improvements to technology include things to assess gametes like eggs to see if there's any data we can gather in terms of being able to predict which egg might be of better quality and which egg might lead to a healthier embryo down the line. One of those technologies that we're implementing currently is something called Violet, aptly named, which looks at an egg closely and can improve assessment of that oocyte. And, you know, in terms of safely storing your precious cargo, those precious oocytes, we are working with the Tomorrow robot, which is a very high-tech cryogenic storage device that allows continuous monitoring tracking of the tissue that's stored in that tank. It allows for some unique electronic identifiers of your specific tissue, allowing very easy identification, location, and very close monitoring with a very in-depth.
Violet, I think you're freezing up.
I'm sorry?
Oh, you're great. You were freezing up for just a moment, but I think you're good now. Sorry.
Okay, good. Thank you. It's important to make sure that the lab that you're going with, like our lab, has a very good history in terms of safely storing your tissue and a very comprehensive disaster plan. Coronavirus, so another hot topic, so conversations we're having every day with our patients. In terms of risk to the tissue that we are removing and storing, there's currently no data to suggest that frozen tissue like eggs or sperm are at risk for acquiring the coronavirus to potentially infect down the line when you choose to use that tissue to, say, for instance, make embryos and become pregnant. So there's absolutely no evidence that that virus can infect eggs that we're aware of at this time. So we feel very good about freezing that tissue and storing it safely for you to use in the future. And we're taking quite a few measures in our clinics to keep you safe and to keep our staff safe in this time of the pandemic. So when we have specific webinars to address coronavirus in terms of what our clinic is doing specifically, as well as what it means to be either pregnant or going through fertility treatment in general on our website. But we're doing a lot of telemedicine, reducing kind of crowding in the waiting rooms, doing some very heavy duty sterilization above and beyond what we normally do, and requiring face masks for everybody entering the building. And we often get asked, well, what can I do in the meantime? You know, if I'm waiting or before I start treatment, and healthy diet, lifestyle, exercise, all of those things are super duper key and evidence based in terms of improving your reproductive potential down the line. Micro and macronutrients are becoming more and more studied in terms of their impact on reproductive health and fertility potential. So we always have conversations about, you know, making sure that you're getting what you need and what your ovaries need in order to keep those eggs healthy and potentially increase the antioxidants that are flowing through the blood getting to those ovaries. So again, tons of information on our website about this, but we also partner with a manufacturer of these supplements, Fertilia LQ, Fertilia Women, and Nausea, that kind of combine a lot of evidence-based recommendations for supplements into kind of neat packages, and we do offer these vitamins for sale at our clinics and online.
Oh,
There you go, Ji. You're still
Oh.
muted.
oh,
There you
am I, can you hear me now? I'm so sorry. Technical difficulties. Sorry again. Okay. I was saying thank you to all the doctors and just how incredible it is that we have female doctors here. Vios is a female-owned company with female investors, female doctors. For me, as a female, that is very reassuring, and it makes it a welcome place to go with a sensitive issue like your own reproduction. So I think that's pretty incredible. If you have questions for Doctors Jeelani, Hayes, and Klenov, we're going to have time for you to ask those questions towards the end of the presentation. But now that we've kind of gotten a base down foundation of knowledge there, we're going to move on to some personal stories. It's my pleasure to introduce Danni Allen. You know her as the winner of NBC's Biggest Loser winner, season 14. She lost 121 pounds. She can pretty much do anything that she sets her mind to, but she also had egg freezing done, and she had it done at Vios, and she'll be sharing her patient perspective. So Danni, I'm gonna let you take it away now.
Oh, thanks, Ji. I always love being called one big loser. It's always my favorite introduction, for sure. So I was someone that struggled with, I mean, we're all women here, and there's no such thing as TMI with me, so I'm going to use all the words, all the fun words. I was someone that struggled with painful periods since I got my period at the age of 11. And it was something that I chronically was dealing with, and I was also someone that struggled with weight gain. You can see a little bit more about my story if you watch the season of Biggest Loser, but it was always something that I really couldn't find and wrap around. And no one was ever able to put the two together until I met Dr. Beltsos, and that's a fast forward to that. But really, I struggled with weight gain my entire life. I was someone that was over 250 pounds at the age of 15, and that's not normal. I was also very active and very athletic. And again, I always had really awful, painful periods, to the points where many doctors kind of suggested that I had endometriosis, but no one ever really took the time to test me for it. And my weight gain became, a problem throughout my entire life, and something I really struggled with until I got to this like aha moment where I really needed to jumpstart. And, I was fortunate to have Jillian Michaels scare half the weight off of me. And then I worked the other half off while I was on the show. But again, even through that time, every doctor that I had met said, if you lose weight, your period pains will go away. It's simple as that. Well, I will tell you very clearly that that did not happen. I actually lost 121 pounds on the show. I got myself down to a size 4, size 6, 15% body fat, really in the category of healthy beyond healthy. And I still was struggling with painful periods. And what some people don't, I think, realize is that your hormones and your weight are so intertwined. And that was something that I educated myself with after leaving the show, because I knew something was still off and something was wrong, and I didn't know what it was. And again, I had doctors saying, well, you have endometriosis. It's just something you have to suck up and deal with. But I really got to a point about 5 years after the show where I was really tired of hearing the assumptions and saying, well, maybe try this, try that. And I reached out to a friend in the field, and she introduced me to Dr. Beltsos, Angie. And I can tell you from the first conversation I had with her, and I could actually get quite emotional here, she was able to talk to me in a way that didn't make me feel like something was wrong, that I didn't do anything wrong, and that there are literally hundreds of thousands of women that are dealing with this every single day. So instantly I was put into a situation where I just felt so confident and so comfortable that I knew that I was in the right place. And it was actually then that I found out I had a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS. Not endometriosis, not issues with my weight gain, but it was a symptom that I honestly had probably this entire time. I don't know exactly when in my development I got it, but really that was my aha moment. And after meeting Dr. Beltsos and the Vios team, I can tell you, I can get teary-eyed talking about every single individual person that helped me along the process, educating me. You guys just saw some really amazing doctors talk about these really big, amazing terms. I don't remember any of them, I'm going to be honest. I just know where I fell and some of the words that I remembered, and I came up with my own cheeky terms to remember them. But really what had happened was, fast forward, it got me to a point where I'm in that category. I am 33 years old. At the time I was 31 going into 32 when I froze my eggs. And I'm just not ready for kids. I'm fortunate I do have that significant other who supported me through the process, which was really great. So that's something I recommend if this is something you're going with. Make sure you just have that support system with you. And going through that process, I'm someone that travels, I was on the road, and I had someone with me from Vios every single step of the way. And it was so great to have that support, because it's scary. You saw those needles in the diagram, you see all these things, and I never knew what a vaginal ultrasound was before this. So that was a very interesting experience. But again, the doctors, everyone that was there was talking you through the process. They made me feel like I'm someone that's smart and can be educated, so they're going to teach me along the way. And that was so impactful, because I didn't feel like I was just hearing statistics. I wasn't another statistic on the wall. I wasn't someone else that was just coming through the office. You walk in and it doesn't feel like a doctor's office. And so when we found out, I was confirmed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, and what are my options? What are my opportunities? And I'm not ready to have children, but we have to face the facts that age truly is just a number, I promise you. But there is, the decline of your eggs goes down as you get older. That's just something that happens. So after talking with the most amazing doctors, again, I can't rave enough, with Vios, I decided to go through the egg freezing process because I wanted more time. I'm not ready for kids. I'm still really enjoying travel, my own time, and especially right now, our place is kind of quiet. So, but at the same time, it was just what I decided worked for me, and my partner was the most amazing support system. My family, everyone was there to really coach me along the process. So that's the one kind of major feedback I can say is make sure you have that support system, because you think hormones are crazy originally. try pumping them into your system over a 10-day period and see how that works as well. But I will say the process was a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be because of the way that Vios educated me. We had webinars, we had videos. How do I feel comfortable? I mean, you have to use a needle on yourself. And I will say, everybody, lidocaine patches are heroes. So I really honestly didn't feel anything from the injections. It was really great, except for that last one at the end that you kind of talked about, Dr. Hayes. That one was a little bit tougher, but I had a great system and I was ready to go through the process. And really what was so great about it was that it was my time to finally give the eggs. And like I said, I had been traveling this whole time. I had a little cooler bag, my Vios cooler bag that I can take along the road with me and keep up with the injections. And I used that as talking points as I was going around the country. And then it was D-Day, right? Time to figure out how many eggs I'm gonna have. And I will say it was probably the simplest process I ever could have thought. I am someone that has aversions to anesthesia. They were all prepared for it, ready for it. So I had no nerves going in. I got the awesome cap and the gown. If you check out my Instagram, you can see that awesome, cool picture that I took right before I went in. And I will tell you, I went in and I came out with a bag of Cheez-Its and water. And I was just like, really feeling great after all of this. And so I did, you know, it was a little groggy, a little loopy. I'm sure my family could tell you some fun stories after that. But really the takeaway was, it was a lot less invasive, a lot less than I had thought. The couple days afterwards, I did experience some of the bloat, had really some tightness in the abdomen. But honestly, I was able to find comfortable positions thanks to the great people at Vios that helped me. They like, oh, maybe lay on your back, put your feet up, different ways to make yourself feel a little bit more comfortable after the process. And I will say, you guys saw the numbers that they're looking for. And one thing to always remember is that we are all unique individuals. So I didn't know what number of eggs I was going to get. I know there's celebrities out there, I won't even call them out by names, but one of them recently did it and she got 9. And that just goes to tell you that money doesn't buy you anything. Fame doesn't buy you anything. I got 27 viable eggs from my first go at it, which is one of the conditions of polycystic ovarian syndrome that you guys mentioned. That's one of the kudos, you know, you have more eggs there, but that gives me just so many more options, so many more opportunities that I could really follow through. And when I'm ready to have that time and to really start that family, should I have, you know, struggles along the way, I know I have that backup and I have the most amazing doctors at Vios. So just really grateful for the experience, and questions and answers, please ask them because that's what we're here for. And I'm really excited to share, continued my journey.
Danni, it must have been such a relief for you to know that it wasn't you. It seemed that before there were so many doctors that were kind of saying you were the problem, like the weight was the problem.
Yeah, it was really reassuring to hear that because trust me, I still struggle. Everyone struggles with what their perfect weight is. And first of all, throw that out the window. That's another webinar. But really knowing that I didn't do anything wrong. It's just kind of how my body was built. And thanks to the amazing doctors at Vios, they were able to help me, you know, achieve a dream that I know is, you know, in the near future, just not right now.
Well, you have an incredibly energetic, positive attitude. But what is one thing that you wish you had known before this entire experience?
I would say the one thing I wish I knew before this experience was that right afterwards, like I said, I was pretty sore, and I'm the type, if you saw me on the show, you tell me it's going to take 5 days to recover, psh, I'm doing it in 2. Listen to the doctors. You need that time to recover. Because I will say, I think I tried to get a little too back at it too quickly. And my body kind of got a little upset with me, a really tightness in the abdomen. Again, nothing life-threatening or scary, but I was just that type that was like, oh, I'm fine. They say to take a few days off. I can go back to work, no problem. Listen to the doctors.
So this whole procedure, it really gives you peace of mind. It's just sort of that extra insurance that, you know, I mean, that you might not even need, but does it help you sleep at night?
Yes, it truly does. And I am now 33, going to be 34. And again, age is just a number, but to have that reassurance that I have 27 eggs, I have potentially 5 opportunities of IVF if I should need it in the future, or who knows, maybe there's an opportunity where I can donate them to someone who really could use it and need them as well. These are all what ifs, and I wouldn't have the what ifs without freezing my eggs, and thanks to the doctors at Vios.
Well, thanks, Danni. You know what? If you have a question for Danni, you can be sure to go to the Q&A box. We'll get to all the questions. But right now, thank you, Danni, for sharing your story. We're going to move on to another story from another patient. I'm going to introduce Christina Fielder. She's a commercial real estate broker, very successful, incredible woman who had egg freezing done at Vios, and she's now going to offer her perspective. So I'm going to let you take it away, Christina.
Thank you so much, Ji. Hi, everybody. So I guess like a lot of people maybe out there, I've always wanted children. I've always known I wanted to be a mom, and I'm 38 years old and haven't met the one yet. And honestly, for many years, kind of just put the egg freezing thing in the back burner. Like I won't need it. I'll eventually, get there. I was in a serious relationship a couple years that I thought was the one. Turned out not to be. And when I had my annual last October with my primary OBGYN, she really encouraged me to start at least investigating the process. So she gave me a couple recommendations of fertility clinics, Vios being one of them, and I decided to start the process and made an appointment, met with Dr. Beltsos, and I had previously had my AMH tested, and I had a pretty low ovarian reserve. So one of my biggest questions was, is it even worth me going through the process? Am I going to be successful going through, the emotional aspect, the time, the money, everything? And, Dr. Beltsos explained the whole process and really encouraged me, yes, it's definitely worth it, as insurance for the future. So I started the whole diagnostic process, doing all of the tests. And in January, I did my first cycle of injections. And, the doctors talked a little bit earlier about the baseline. So I had 2 follicles when I started, and after a week of injections, I still had 2 follicles and they weren't growing, which is, I think, a bigger concern. That kind of took the wind out of my sails. I actually hadn't even thought that maybe it won't work. But, Dr. Beltsos has lots of tricks up her sleeve. So she started me on estrogen priming. So I was taking estrogen, a combination of estrogen and progesterone for about 4 to 5 weeks. And then towards the very end of February, I started another cycle of the injections. And this time my body was responding and the follicles were growing. I had more, and I did a retrieval in March, and I got 3 eggs. So a lot different than Danni's experience, but I was, yes, very happy and grateful that I actually got 3. And having kind of just gone through the whole process and already investing so much time and money, even though, it's, when I started it, I thought I was kind of going to get in, get out, do it. It would take a few weeks of my life, put it behind me, carry on. Obviously now I'm in the 4th month of this. But again, I just really wanted to maximize the benefit for the future. So now I'm actually preparing for my second full cycle of injections. I'm doing priming again. This time Dr. Beltsos has added in testosterone, and I'll probably start my injections in about a week and a half. It's much different going into this 3rd round. I will say that I was intimidated by the process entirely. I'm not a person who's scared of needles, but I've never put a needle in myself. And I was scared of doing it wrong, frankly. Mixing medications, mixing a liquid with a powder, and but you get the hang of it. And it's, I don't think that they would ask us to do it at home if you could really screw it up that badly. And there's plenty of videos. I asked a lot of questions. I asked my nurse and all the nurses as many questions that came up, and everybody's always there to help you. Echoing Danni's sentiment, support system. I'm single, so I don't have a partner, but I have great friends, parents, family, everybody. I actually told people at work just because I knew I was going to have to be going out a lot and going to the doctor a lot. And, it's kind of an awkward conversation to have with 2 60-year-old men, but I did it. And I think it's important that a lot of people, prior to me starting this, I didn't know much about it. I had 2 friends who had done it, but they couldn't even really remember the process. And I think the more we talk about it, the more men and women understand who haven't gone through it. I think it's a conversation that needs to happen. So as intimidating as the process was, I'm so glad that I did it, and I'm raring to go for the next one. And I also, I think the best laid plans, we can always try to do this thing when you have the least amount of stress in your life. The first round, I had very, very stressful period of time at work. Probably didn't help. I also been dealing with a bad back injury throughout all of this. So, again, Dr. Beltsos and the whole staff at Vios has really worked with me a lot to juggle all of these different things. And I was on a lot of medications for my back. And, obviously you want to make sure you're talking to the doctors and the nurses, and so there aren't any interactions that might affect you adversely. But all in all, I'm just so happy that I did it. And, I'm hopeful that this next round, we're going to get even more. And, it's insurance for the future, and hopefully for the family, that when I do meet Mr. Right, if I need to use them, they're there.
Christina, did you find that this whole process and going through with it, despite any of the difficulties and obstacles you faced, especially with you having the back issue as well, do you find that it's taken a bit of the pressure off? Because now maybe you don't feel as much pressure in terms of finding Mr. Right, immediately.
I think so. I mean, obviously there's not a lot of dating happening right now. Not meeting anybody new and going to the bars and restaurants. But I think, when that starts again, absolutely, because it's on my time then, it takes pressure off any relationship, whether you're just getting to know someone or once you get into a more serious relationship, because that you have that in the back of your mind, and you're not like, okay, the clock is ticking, and you're trying to have those conversations maybe prematurely. So it definitely takes some of the pressure off.
I mean, it's so unfair. Evolution and biology just hasn't caught up with us women. Meanwhile, men can have babies. I mean, look at Larry King. He's having kids, hello. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But so what's one thing that you wish, Christina, you had known before you had entered this whole process?
I think, just be patient with the process and with yourself and your body, because it definitely has not gone the way I thought it would go. But our bodies are amazing. And, I've never been more bloated in my entire life. And I could definitely feel that my ovaries were big and very, my belly was tender, and I had bruises on my belly, but, I healed, and our bodies are just incredible at that. But be kind to your body and give it the nutrition that it needs, and drink lots of water, and you'll get there. And then it'll just be in the rearview mirror, and, we're strong and we can do it.
Well, you've got this next round coming up, and you said you already have 3. It just takes 1. So, I think this is a good sign.
Me too. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina, for sharing your personal story. And of course, Christina will be taking questions as well at the end of this presentation. But now that we've heard Christina's story, we've heard Danny's story, now it's time, I'm sure you're wondering about sort of the nitty gritty in terms of, the cost of this procedure. What does that look like? And of course, we have Lisa McGuire, who's the patient coordinator at Vios, and she's going to share some info on pricing for services.
Thanks, Ji. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And as a big thank you to you from us at Vios, we have 3 packages to offer you with prices that you can't beat. So the first package is package number 1. That includes 1 retrieval. So we're going to aspirate your eggs 1 time. The typical price of that, what we normally charge, is $7,900 to you for attending our webinar for $5,950, which is obviously amazing. And we are requiring a deposit of $2,000. More about the deposits in a minute. Our next package is package number 2, which is 2 retrievals. So we're going to aspirate your eggs 2 times. The normal price for that is $15,800, excuse me. And we're offering it to you for $10,000. So that's $5,000 per retrieval. And we would require a $3,000 deposit for that. This is recommended for women with low AMH. But if you don't have a low AMH, you can choose this option as well. Next package option is package number 3. This includes 3 retrievals, so aspirating your eggs 3 times. The typical price for this, the normal price, is $23,700. We're offering it to you today for $12,000. So that's $4,000 per retrieval to give you the total of $12,000. We would require a deposit of $4,000 for that. And this is also recommended for women with low AMH, but again, you can choose any option you wish. So there's a few important things to note. Most insurances won't cover cryopreservation, freezing of your eggs, unless you meet certain pre-existing conditions or certain requirements. So if you're curious about your individual insurance plan, we have a specialized verification of benefits team that will gladly run your insurance for you and give you more information on your specific benefits. And we would love to go over that with you at your new patient consult. Another important note to make is that packages do not include the cost of medications, meaning what you're paying for is you would also need to pay for medication in addition to what you're paying. But luckily, if you're a patient who doesn't have insurance coverage, Vios has special relationships with certain pharmacies, and we're happy to offer you exclusive pricing for certain medications, and we can get you a really great deal on those medications that you would need for your cycle. Also, if you're a patient who doesn't have insurance coverage, our packages will include the new patient consult, so you wouldn't be charged extra for your new patient consultation. Your deposit, if you make your deposit, which would be due 2 weeks from today, which would be May 5th, it secures your pricing, the special pricing, through the end of 2020. So if you pay your deposit now and you decide that you're not quite ready to start your cycle, we would love to hold your spot and we can work with your timeline. And then also, these packages include the price of cryopreservation for 1 whole year. So you won't have to pay anything for freezing your eggs for a whole year once they're aspirated, but after the initial year, your annual fee will be $720, and more on that at your new patient consult. And again, if you have any specific questions about your specific insurance plan, or you have any more specific questions, we'd be happy to direct you to our financial team, or I can try to answer any questions you might have at the end of the presentation. So,
Thank you, Lisa. Really appreciate it. No, that sounds like a chunk of change, and of course, maybe Christina and Danny can speak to why it's an important financial investment. If you think about how much you're spending on vacations or beauty routines and regimens, facials, you know, other things that you're doing, maybe those gorgeous new shoes that you allow yourself to splurge on, and that really fancy pocketbook. If you really think about that, and think also about what people are spending in terms of even braces that people are getting later in life as well. So just, keep all that in mind in terms of thinking about that cost, that think about the money that you're spending throughout the year. And this is an investment, an insurance investment for your future family, really. So that I think it's really important to think about it in that context. But if that is daunting to you, that financial figure, right now we have Kati Deutschle joining us, and she has a really fantastic new tech startup called emBorrow. It's EMBORROW. And I think Kati can speak to a process and potentially help with that cost. So I'm going to let you take it away, Kati.
Thanks, Ji. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so as Ji said, my name is Kati Deutschle, and I'm the CEO of emBorrow. So emBorrow is a company that provides education, support, and affordable financing for not only women, but also couples that are going through fertility treatments. So we just saw the cost for egg freezing, which can range normally anywhere from about $8,000 per round. And then you also have the cost of medication. And we also heard that most of the times insurance won't cover egg freezing because it's an elective procedure. So what are women doing to be able to afford this? A lot of us don't have that huge chunk of change that are sitting in our savings account, or we want to save that money for our future, and we don't necessarily want to take that out. We also may need multiple rounds, and maybe we can't afford that. So what are the options right now? Sometimes we're using credit cards, which have enormous interest rates, and we're paying all that interest. Sometimes we're looking at our 401k. Maybe we can take a 401k loan, but most of the time employers won't allow you to do that, or you're compromising your retirement savings. Sometimes we're looking at personal loans, but the fees are high, they have the high interest, and they don't offer you any support during your fertility journey. So these options are suboptimal, and none of them provide something important to you. And what's important to you? Something's missing. They're not providing you with that support. They're not providing you with a community that can help you during that process. So when you're going through this process initially, you're not going to know what to expect. Maybe you're not comfortable sharing this with your close friends or your family, and you want to talk to other women that have gone through it. You want that community that can answer any of your questions or provide advice. Again, if you're not going through it, maybe you want to talk to somebody that has frozen their eggs before. So how do you connect with somebody like that? You want to find a community. So now we have a different option for you, and that's emBorrow. So emBorrow provides you with education, awareness of this fertility journey, and also a community that has been there and can provide you with that support and that advice that you're going to need to go through your egg freezing round. So what are we about? So emBorrow does provide you with some financing. So we do provide affordable rates. Our rates start as low as 6.99% for that financing. We also offer discounts that if you enroll in our auto pay. We don't have any fees for applying for financing. So no application fees, and we do have an online application that is 3 easy steps. You can apply online, either on your PC, your laptop, or even on your mobile. We also provide you with that community that I was telling you about, women that have gone through this, that can provide you with tips, that can provide you with advice that maybe you wouldn't have normally, and you definitely wouldn't have if you put this cost on your credit card or took out a personal loan. We also provide you with education. So we provide you with education as to your fertility, maybe different questions to ask your physician before you start your treatment. You know, we're providing you with a community of women that have been there and can provide with some helpful tips. So I kind of want to share where emBorrow was founded from. So emBorrow was actually founded out of my own fertility journey. I'm also a fellow egg freezer. In 2015, I was 35, turning 36. I wasn't married. I always knew I wanted to have children. So I ended up doing the same testing to see where my testing lied. I also had diminished ovarian reserve. I didn't have a high egg count. So I ended up freezing my eggs 3 times. So during my journey, when I first started, I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know what it was going to feel like on the medications. I didn't know how many appointments I was going to have to go through. I didn't know how to mix medications. I was just basically a fish out of water, not knowing what to do. So based on my own journey, we created emBorrow because we're going to provide you with that community. We're going to connect you with those women that know exactly what it feels like to administer the medications. Somebody available for you to talk to while you're going through it. Maybe you're not feeling good one day. Is this normal for me? I don't know. So you want to have that community. Also, during that journey, I also got a lot of questions about how am I going to afford this? And a lot of women that I talked to would forego egg freezing because of the cost, because it is so expensive. So I wanted to create a company where we would be able to provide affordable financing for those women to take this step. For my journey, I am going to be using my frozen eggs. I did end up getting married several years later. I've tried IVF 7 times with failed rounds, and it hasn't worked. So I did end up thawing my eggs. So for me, freezing my eggs was, it was an insurance policy because I'm cashing out on that policy. I'm using those frozen eggs. So I wanted to create a company where no woman would be turned away because they didn't have that support, they didn't have the education, or they didn't have the ability to be able to afford freezing their eggs. So this is what emBorrow is doing. So if you need any help with the financial aspect of it, with the community, or even with the education, please reach out to us.
Katie, thank you so much for sharing your personal story and also starting something really incredible. I know that you've had some really positive feedback from people.
We definitely have.
Well, perfect. Can you give the website for your organization, emBorrow?
Oh, yeah. Let me share again. I just had it up there. Okay, so here's our website. It's emBorrow.com.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that everyone gets the spelling right.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. It's emBorrow, so emBorrow.com. You can also contact me. My email's on this slide as well. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions, if you're not sure if you want to apply, or if you just have questions before you apply. Again, there's no fees to apply at all, but if you have any general questions, please shoot me an email.
And that's so much of a lower interest rate than if you were to put it on your credit card. And if you don't have a rich uncle to ask, I mean, this is probably your best option, I would say.
Exactly.
So thank you, everybody, all of our panelists. Right now is the time that we're going to be taking your questions, and you can just head over to the Q&A box and ask your question there. Also, I'm told that if you want to ask your question personally, you can just raise your hand as well. Danny, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just trying to give a visual of there's a hand raising option.
She's our Vanna White there, like visual.
I'm also the one that had to push back my laptop so I didn't fling it off when I did that.
Okay, so I am seeing some questions in the Q&A box, so I guess I will just read them. So I've got one question that said, I got my AMH done about 9 days after my period, and it was 0.914. Do you think if I repeated it at day 2 through 5, it would be higher?
I can take that one. So AMH, like I said, is your bank account. It doesn't vary or fluctuate by cycle. FSH, which recruits and activates follicles per cycle, varies, and that's why it needs to be repeated and best done between the first 5 days. So AMH can be done anytime. Important to know if you were on birth control, some people are on it, and that can affect your AMH, but cycle variation does not impact your AMH.
Dr. Jeelani, I'm glad you mentioned birth control. So at how long does someone need to be off of birth control to get an accurate reading of their AMH?
That's a great question. So it actually varies and depends on what kind of birth control you're on. If you're on a short-acting pill form, it should be right away. So we've all had those friends who missed a pill and accidentally got pregnant, right? So it's very short-acting. So they have a very short half-life. So if you miss a pill or you skip a couple days, your body bounces back from it. But if you're on some long-term suppression, an implant or a long-acting, so it truly varies. I would ask your doctor. If you're on a long-term hormonal implant, typically 3 months is what we say before your body kind of bounces back.
Okay, we'll go to our next question. This is from Shannon. Are there any supplements that can increase quality of egg, like EPA, DHA, selenium, antioxidants?
I can jump in there with help from my colleagues too. So there are some supplements that preliminary data, primarily in animal models, have been shown to improve overall egg quality. I saw another question down there too, which we'll get to a little bit, but there's really no supplement to improve egg quantity, unfortunately. So we're born with all the eggs we're ever going to have. But as far as, promising supplements, there's no magic bullet, I'll say number one. And it's definitely the most important thing is to eat a varied, healthy, fresh diet. So avoiding preservatives, toxins, eating as much clean food as you possibly can. If we need to take supplements, some of the better studied ones include things like CoQ10. Typically, we would recommend doing like 200 milligrams about 3 times a day for doing that supplement. Things like omega-3 fatty acids are important for oxidative stress and oocyte health. We're learning more about things like vitamin D, particularly in a PCOS population, is probably more and more important to be in a healthy range for vitamin D. And other PCOS-related supplements include, myo-inositol. Everybody needs to be taking folic acid in terms of preparing for pregnancy down the line, but there is some evidence that it might improve the kind of metabolism of that oocyte as well. And I welcome kind of input from my expert colleagues, perhaps even Dr. Hayes.
Yeah, Violet, I totally agree. I would say something to think about along with adding supplements that can improve egg and sperm quality, you know, just reproduction in general. It's removing toxins like you touched on. So I think there are things you can subtract from your life that can also influence egg quality. So things like getting rid of plastics in your kitchen, especially not, you know, heating plastics in the microwave, putting them in the dishwasher. Things like that are actually leaching chemicals that we're exposed to every day. And just because it's common doesn't mean it's safe. Organic produce, you know, in the months leading up to freezing your eggs could be helpful too. It doesn't have to be completely organic all the time, but removing some of the pesticide residues from the body can be helpful as well. And I would say, you know, just kind of being mindful of some of the household products that you use. Things with a lot of fragrance can be unhealthy. And some of your personal care products, you don't have to throw everything out and start all over, but it's something that you could kind of be mindful of and look at the environmental working group. They have some good information about what you can be looking for in those things and try to avoid.
To piggyback on that, I think this next question is also about a potential toxin that we all partake in. From Cicely Garvin wants to know, of course, we're discussing vitamins and nutrition. What are your thoughts on consuming alcohol during the oocyte cryopreservation cycle?
So I think, you know, our general recommendation leading up to any kind of fertility treatment, including freezing eggs, just to be as healthy as possible, would be probably to really minimize alcohol or eliminate it during the treatment process. You don't have to abstain for months and months leading up to it. It doesn't accumulate in your body. But, you know, it's certainly eliminating completely any tobacco use, including marijuana. And very much minimizing or eliminating alcohol, and a minimal amount of caffeine is okay. So you don't have to completely eliminate that from your life.
Well, it's a mini trial run for before, you know, that's what it's gonna be like when you're pregnant. So this is
exactly. Exactly.
So that makes sense.
I'd like to answer from a patient perspective, kind of combining both of those questions as well. So I also did eliminate alcohol during that experience. And, you know, when you're really focusing on what the big term goal is, it really wasn't as hard as many of you might be thinking, especially as, you know, my glass is empty. But really kind of talking to the point of eating as naturally as possible. I was very fortunate that I came across this opportunity in my lifetime when I was focusing on my personal health. And really, I've eliminated as many as many foods from my diet. I eat as natural as I can. And I want to say that I had a very successful output, and by no means am I saying that's 100% it, but I don't eat any preservatives. I eat very clean. I got rid of what I called the white devils: white rice, white flour, white sugar, white potatoes, because those are all things that have been processed or manipulated in some sort of way. So I can't imagine that it hurt. I think it actually really helped my process. And like I said, I was very fortunate to get 27 eggs right off the bat. And not that that's the case for everyone, but being able to eliminate alcohol and really focus, it also gave me an opportunity to remember that I'm a priority and it's worth that effort and it's worth that focus. So it might sound really daunting at the time, and depending on, like Christina, you're still going through your journey, giving up alcohol but I did it for 2 years. So I'm surviving and it's back into my regimen, but on you know, one glass at a time.
2 years, you show off. Overachiever there. Since we're talking about, you know, watching what you're putting into your body and what you're exposing your body to, like plastics, here's another question. What kinds of exercises improve blood flow to the ovaries, or is that a thing?
So I don't know of any exercises that directly increase blood flow to the ovaries. I think all of us would agree that the more exercise in a healthy, sustainable way will only benefit ovarian health and general health. So I think that's something we can recommend, but I'm not aware of any specific exercise for improving ovarian blood flow.
I will add to that. So I agree. I know there's certain things that you could do. So if you have a lower reserve and you want to nourish the eggs that you have, sometimes there's been few studies with acupuncture, acupressure, increasing blood flow to that area. Also, if you work out a lot, if you're tend to be an athlete, a good way to gauge is keeping your heart rate low. Our leg muscles are one of our strongest muscles. So if you notice that you're working out, all of that blood flow that goes to your reproductive organs, which aren't necessarily your vital organs, your ovaries and your uterus, the blood flow shifts away and goes to our larger muscles. So if you're trying to nourish your ovaries and your reproductive organs, I say moderate exercise, nothing high intensity.
So let's say you've been on birth control most of your entire adult life. Does that mean that potentially you'll have more eggs preserved and ready to go?
No, unfortunately it doesn't. I wish it did. Birth control only stops that one dominant follicle from activating and ovulating out. So it prevents ovulation. Otherwise, going from that 90 to 100, then 6 to 12 that we spoke about earlier is a biological process that we have yet to, we know exactly what activates it, but we don't know how to control it. I wish we did, but we don't.
Oh, got it. I'm sure that's going to happen in the future, though. This is a question from Sarah. What kind of genetic testing can you do on the oocytes?
Somebody want to take that?
I can grab that one. So there is actually no genetic testing available for oocytes, which is why technology, you know, like that Violet technology is promising, you know, in terms of a non-invasive way to predict quality in oocytes. I think we still have some learning to do in terms of how to do that in a non-invasive way. Really, the only way we can assess the genetic quality is when we create an embryo, and then we're able to biopsy that embryo and do pre-implantation genetic testing. And also kind of in the realm of not quite live yet is sampling kind of extruded DNA from an embryo or from an egg, and sampling that DNA to get a really good idea of what's actually going on in that embryo or in that egg. So we're not there yet in terms of doing genetic testing on the oocyte itself.
Okay, here's another, it sounds like a very complicated question that I don't understand, but one of the doctors will be able to answer. This is from Heather. Has the ASRM released new guidelines on starting IVF treatment? I know COVID-19 has put a stop on non-essential surgeries. Has this changed? I'm supposed to start my baseline mid-May. Will I be able to go from baseline to egg retrieval to transfer without waiting?
Here at Vios, I think ASRM, the last statement that they released last week, said that in the next coming days before April 27th, they will release a statement on how to reopen safely. So I think that's coming, so stay tuned. And if you're here with us, talk to your doctor at Vios and we'll keep you updated on how we're protecting you and how we're starting.
Thanks, Dr. Jeelani. Here's another question. I think, Dr. Klenov, you kind of already answered this one. I think this is the one you were alluding to, but the best supplements to take to increase egg quality and quantity. And you said there's not really anything to increase quantity, but maybe some for quality.
There's, I think Violet touched on the vitamin D. There's a study out there, and I know I've gotten a lot of patients asking that if you take vitamin D, it increases your AMH. So I don't know if that's what they are referring to, but you can't grow, like Dr. Klenov said, more eggs. So you can nourish the eggs that you have. So AMH is a reflection of the little cluster of cells that surround your eggs. So if you feed those clustering cells, surrounding cells, food, then they secrete more hormone, and it may artificially boost your AMH, but you're not growing more eggs, if that's what that question is alluding to.
I think this is a good question probably for Christina or Katie or Danny to answer. This is from an anonymous attendee. So what advice or recommendations would you give to someone who is scared to embark on this journey? Of course, it's totally natural and human to feel scared. So I'll let one of you who's gone through the process as a patient answer that question.
I'm happy to jump in. I can tell you, I was also one of those ones that was scared, and I actually ended up postponing my egg freezing from my initial month because I just felt like I needed more time to really understand the process. I was someone that kind of was doing the steps that they're guiding you through, as eating healthier, getting myself, and my journey was very, very public as well. But I was just, I wasn't sure, did it feel natural? Was it I'm in this new phase of no preservatives, no nothing, and now I'm about to start injecting myself. So I actually did take that time and postponed it a little bit longer so I could really wrap my head around it. And like I said, thanks to the resources at with Vios, they were able to send me a lot of opportunities, and maybe even Katie can talk about, I was able to build a network thanks to social media. I'm someone that is not afraid of TMI, so I was able to let people know that I was going through it, and I was overwhelmed by the responses of so many women out there that were going through this, that had already done it, or maybe not as successful on their first or second tries. And when you felt like you weren't alone in that process, that's what let me lift that burden of fear. So I will say I'm the first one to raise my hand and say I was very anxious and nervous about it. So I postponed it a little bit. And finally I got to a point where I was like, no, this is what I want to do. I have the best people in place to do it. And my body's naturally going to work it out in the end anyways. And it has, and it's been over almost 1.5 years since I've done it. And I feel so good because with Vios and the continuing education that you get from them, educate yourself and surround yourself by the right people is what I would say.
Thanks, Danni. Katie, Christina, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I can jump in. So like I was saying with emBorrow, what I wanted to do with emBorrow was create this community, because it is really scary to jump into something like this because you don't know what to expect. You don't know how your body is going to react. Maybe, again, you don't want to share this with your friends or your family. This is something that, you know, you're keeping in. So my advice would be if you can try to connect with somebody that has gone through the process, because then you actually can talk to somebody, you know, not anonymously, but talk to somebody that's been through it and that can answer your questions. You're probably more likely to open up to somebody that's actually gone through it. So at emBorrow, you can connect with me. I gave my email address. Feel free to reach out to me and let me answer your questions. I'm happy to, when this whole thing is over, meet you for coffee. We can FaceTime, we can Zoom. I'm happy, you know, to be there and answer any questions. I think that really helps, having, you know, somebody that's gone through it that can kind of guide you and give you that perspective on what they experienced.
Christina, did you want to add anything?
I would just echo that as well. I mean, I was very anxious about the process just because there were so many unknowns and so many things, so many different steps, right? And every time I got through one step, you know, okay, I've crossed that hurdle. And, you know, the second round when I had to do the trigger shot, I was really good at needles, but that trigger needle is a little bit longer and went in a different place. So, you know, I had to work up some extra courage, but then once I went through the whole process, like I was saying earlier, now I'm really just not anxious or stressed about this last cycle because I know what to expect. I mean, maybe it won't look exactly the same, but I know that, you know, I'll get through it. And, you know, just being, okay, I totally agree that speaking with someone who's gone through the whole thing, ask as many questions just to kind of ease your mind, because you know, you're going to naturally have a little bit of anxiety because it's new and it's, you know, I mean, it's not a normal thing necessarily to have to stick needles into your abdomen, but just know that, you know, you have support wherever you need it. So whether it's Vios or Katie or another patient who's gone through it.
Well, I think it's fascinating because I think for Christina, for Katie, for Danni, each of you had sort of a different experience from the other, but all three of you are firm in the fact that once you started this process, that you really felt the support of the community. And especially at Vios, you're going to have really the best support from the doctors and everybody, all the personnel that works there as well, no matter whether you're in St. Louis, Milwaukee, or here in Chicago. So hopefully, if you're still here with us and you're the one that asked that question, you're not afraid to maybe dip your toe into this whole process, because it sounds like it's a really wonderful community that supports one another. So I have another doctor question. We have about 10 minutes left. If you have a non-hormonal IUD, can you go through the egg freezing process?
Yes, actually, we don't require that you have your IUD removed. We can still move through the process.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So the IUD would be in the uterus, and we don't mess with that at all. We're basically just diverting to the ovaries on each side, even during the egg retrieval procedure, so it doesn't get in our way.
And then I know this is something that you touched on earlier, Dr. Hayes, but I think someone commented on it. Egg freezing does not decrease natural fertility at all if I don't want to use the eggs down the road and just do it naturally. And I think when we think about egg retrieval, we think, oh gosh, that's taking away from our stockpile. But that's definitely not the case.
Right, right. I mean, we're born with millions of eggs. And when we go through menopause, we have about 1,000 eggs left. And so when you're talking about retrieving, 5 eggs, 10 eggs, 20 eggs, it really does not have an impact on your reproductive timeline at all.
Sorry, Ji. I was going to add one more thing that it's important to remember those eggs, once they've been activated, that if you don't use them, you're going to lose them anyways. So we're not taking anything extra or even taking from your pool. We're taking from the ones that come to the front line. The best analogy is like a champagne glass, and Dr. Beltsos always says this, is the ones that bubble to the top. If you don't take that sip, they're going to wither away, and the next set comes up. So we're only taking what's activated.
Well, that's an analogy I can understand. You said that from the beginning. Okay. So,
all of them, by the way, they have tons of awesome analogies for everything. So that's only one of several.
Women after my own heart. Okay, here's another question that just popped up. I'm 42. Am I too old? This is a good question because I'm 41. I'm in a relationship, but not the one. Should we freeze eggs or embryos? If we freeze embryos, will they be mine? If I don't use my eggs, can I give them to my sister? Wow, this is a loaded question. Multiple questions in this. Guys, I don't know which of you ladies wants to take it away.
Dr. Klenov, do you want to start, or Dr. Hayes?
Sure. So number one, am I too old to freeze my eggs at 42? So I'd say the short answer is no, but there's a lot of caveat and nuance. That's a conversation you have with your physician. Egg quantity and quality, they decline with age. It's an inevitability, unfortunately. So what it means is if we're lucky enough to be starting with potentially an above average number of eggs at age 42, then chances are higher that we get a good number of eggs to be able to cryopreserve. What we will be up against ultimately is that if you choose to create embryos with those eggs, there's going to be a higher risk for having genetic abnormalities in those eggs, because that is entirely dependent on female age as you go through either a process to create and freeze eggs or make embryos or become pregnant naturally. So kind of to summarize, no, it's not too old, but there's just going to be a conversation about how many eggs is realistic to be able to get from a stimulation, and then how many eggs might you need at 42 in order to have a good chance at a live birth. And that's going to be higher as compared to a woman who's in her 20s or her 30s, just due to the age-related risk of having genetic abnormalities. And you're gonna have to remind me of the other parts.
Yeah, I will remind you. The other question was, and I promise this was not my question, okay? Go on and ask this. She is dating somebody, but he's not the one. If she was asking whether to do the eggs versus the embryo. If they do an embryo, does she own the embryo? And the follow-up question was then, could she gift a family member, her sister, of eggs or an embryo?
So that's a great question. So a lot of our patients who are potentially partnered but aren't certain if that person is going to be like a parent in that relationship, then we have these conversations. You could use their sperm. You could also potentially use an anonymous donor sperm. We have an entire division within our clinic that deals with third-party reproduction exclusively, and they kind of guide our patients through this process. There are some regulations and things in terms of donating tissue to friends or family members, and there's a lot of legal ramifications when you're kind of creating embryos, and so we always recommend agreements be in place ahead of doing that. So a longer conversation to be had about those things too, but options to, potentially freeze eggs or make embryos down the line, or even at the time, or rather make embryos either with donor sperm, if you're not with the one.
I would add one more thing to that. Like Dr. Klenov said, we have a great third-party division here at Vios. So what we've been doing for patients who are freezing their eggs or creating embryos are offering them for fertility preservation, offering them what they would do proactively, which we call FDA testing. So making sure at the time of tissue creation that we're doing a full, complete FDA exam on them, and FDA mandatory infectious disease testing. So if they do want to donate them to somebody in the future, that's a viable option because they've already been FDA screened proactively. So that's an option that we'll reach out if we see anybody who's creating tissue for fertility preservation. Touching back to, I think if you're 42 and if you're ever considering, is this the right time? Am I too late? It's never too late. It's like, would you get pregnant naturally at that age? It's that same. Younger the better, of course. But if you're not in the place where you would want to be, then freeze tissue, right? And like nobody would say don't get pregnant at 42 because the risk of abnormality. So like Dr. Klenov said, yes, multiple cycles is recommended because with each cycle you get a different batch, but it's something to be cognizant of, that age is the primary factor in fertility. And even though your reserve may vary, younger the better. And yes, that's it, sorry.
Oh no, that's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Jeelani. Oh, so we're going to end on this last question, and then I have 2 poll questions to ask you, so don't go anywhere, but this is the last question for the panel. Do you have a better chance of a live birth with frozen eggs or frozen embryos? And I don't even know whether you can answer that question, but if one of the doctors wants to take a crack at it.
Oh yeah, I think what it comes down to, honestly, is just the health of the eggs in general. So if you have healthy eggs, they will create healthy embryos. And so there's really no need to create embryos at this point. If you aren't with the partner that you think you'll be with long term, you can just be reassured that freezing eggs and then thawing them and creating embryos, even if you have to freeze those embryos, for whatever reason, they can still be very healthy.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hayes. We have been getting some cost questions, but Lisa, I think there's an email, right, where people can reach out to you in terms of whether, you know, insurance questions or HSA questions, any of that.
Yes, correct. So specifically for the Chicago region, but any region can go ahead and email us at pcchicago@viosfertility.com, and we'd be happy to take your emails and send them the right direction. Again, that's pcchicago@viosfertility.com.
And Lisa, just the general website as well for people to find out more information.
Yeah, so you can definitely visit us at www.viosfertility.com.
Okay, and of course it's VIOS Fertility.
VIOS Fertility. Yes.
.com. Okay, so hopefully you're still with us. I just wanted to ask you a final polling question. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This has been super informative, even for me. I've learned so much. And I think hopefully you found some hope in this discussion as well, and learning from, I mean, it's pretty incredible to get this much time with some of the top doctors that you can ever find. So thank you guys so much for your time and being with us. So did you find today's webinar helpful? And that's our final poll questions of the night, that one. And how likely are you to schedule an appointment to discuss egg freezing with a Vios physician? A, very likely. B, maybe. I'm still considering my options. And C, thanks, but it's not for me. I don't know, from the wonderful faces and personalities, and then also just the depth of knowledge that these physicians have. I don't know how you wouldn't want them to be your doctor. And then also all the personal stories that everybody shared as well. Just really appreciate Danni and Christina, and, you know, really Kati also for sharing your story, and then also starting that wonderful program, so that if this is financially daunting for you, and of course initially when you think about those numbers, it's certainly might take your breath away for a second, but if you break it down and think about what you spend throughout the year, because I know how much shoes cost, and I know how much really nice purses cost, and vacations, and this is something that you're investing in your future. It's something that I think, you know, I think because of panels like this and webinars like this, and because of wonderful resources that you're here sharing your story and your knowledge, it's becoming more common for us to talk about and think about. And hopefully you won't have to sit on the fence and think about it for as long as our generation had to. Maybe the younger generations can just go right to it. So the answer to the poll, did you find today's webinar helpful? 100%, yay! Thank you so much. And how likely are you to schedule an appointment to discuss egg freezing? 50% say very likely and 50% say maybe. I'm still considering my options. It's only human to kind of be on that maybe fence. We totally understand. But they can always reach out to you, right, Dr. Beltsos? They can reach out to Vios.
Yeah, and anytime that you are thinking about this, please don't hesitate to reach out to viosfertility.com, make an appointment to speak with one of the incredible physicians that we have in Milwaukee, St. Louis, or Chicago. And on behalf of Vios, we want to thank you for spending your evening with us. We want to thank Ji for being an amazing MC and keeping us engaged. And
my pleasure.
She's awesome. I want to thank our patients, Christina, Danni, Katie, for being here. We want to talk about our finance team, that access to care is very, very important and very powerful to be able to execute on some of these things. So thank you, Katie and Lisa, for really explaining it. And finally, to our physicians, our experts in reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Violet Klenov in St. Louis, Dr. Roohi Jeelani in Chicago, Dr. Ellen Hayes in Milwaukee. So we wish you all well, be safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. Hannah, Rachel, and Lisa helped us organize this, and Daphne. Woo-hoo! Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.